Hi, everyone. Bob Thibodeau here. Welcome to Ask Bob. I'm also known as the podcast Yoda. I've got that comment or got that nickname from participating in some groups on Facebook where I was answering some questions about podcasting, and someone commented, you're like the Yoda of podcasting. And I will say, yeah, you're a podcast Yoda. And the nickname just kind of stuck. But in this series of podcasts, I answer your questions about podcasting, and I'll provide insight on the more common questions as well. But specifically, I'm interested in answering your questions. So if you have a question, and the part of this podcast training program that I've developed, this section is called Ask Bob. So if you have a question on podcasting, ask Bob. Okay, I'd recommend you subscribe to this platform because that way you'll be updated every time we answer another question and publish a new episode. If you have any questions to ask me, go to our website, podcast-training.com, click on the contact form at the top, and send along your question. If I use your question in a podcast, I will give you a shout out for it and send you along a free download to my book, The Complete Guide to Podcasting. It's a $37 value. You'll receive it absolutely free of charge if we use your question on our program. Now, if you have a podcast or a website, something like that you're promoting or you want us to promote for you, and we use your question, I will give you a shout out for it and put the link to it down in the show notes below. So ask Bob whatever question you may have concerning podcasting. Now, we've been answering this question in this past series about why should you have a podcast? Maybe people in businesses are wondering if podcasting is something they should be pursuing. They wonder, is it too difficult to do? Is it complicated? Is it cost efficient? What are they going to talk about? Will anybody listen to me? And how do I build an audience? And these are all valid questions, and we've been answering them as we go along. So let's take a few minutes now, and we'll answer this next question. Last time I covered, will anybody listen to me? And I introduced this topic of helping to grow your audience. Today, I want to specifically address the question, how can you build an audience? And the processes are wide and varied for this, and I can't cover all the possibilities here in this short video. But let me cover some of the more popular methods of building your podcast audience. And first and foremost, you should be podcasting to a person, not to a group. What does that mean, Bob? It's called your avatar. Every episode should be designed to bring value to that one perfect person, the perfect individual that needs the information you are going to share. Now, there will be others that get great value from your podcast as well, but your podcast should be talking to one person. That will make you more personable. It'll make it seem as if you're talking directly to the person doing the listening. Everything in your design and your publication must be directed at your perfect avatar. Do not try to appeal to the masses. You know the old saying, market it everyone, sell no one. Well, that applies to your podcast as well. Next, be sure to tap into the vastness of social media. Share and promote your podcast across different platforms on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube. All have unique audiences. They're all not on every platform. Each one has a specific demographic that is popular to that platform. All of them will help you to reach their specific users. But if you do not share and promote and cross-promote your episodes, there is a very high chance nobody else will either. You can't count on them liking and sharing it with their friends and putting it on their websites and things like that. That's just not going to happen. One, unless you ask, but two, how are you going to reach different demographics? You have to go to where they are at. So use social media to your advantage. Okay. There was a time when if you wanted to promote your brand or your business, you had to take out a TV, radio, or newspaper ad. And although that form of advertising promotion is still valid for local markets, especially if you have a traditional brick and mortar business, it's not so effective for the digital age, especially for podcasting. You can take out an ad in your local newspaper for your podcast, and really it's just a waste of money. Okay. Even if your local market has, 20,000 people on their subscribing list for the newspaper, how many of them are actually going to read that little blurb of an ad? Okay, unless they are specifically looking for it. Wouldn't you rather take that money, invest it into social media advertising, and target those who are looking for that specific item that you're trying to promote? That's a more cost-effective way and a more successful way, right? Now, use the social media to your advantage. Have a business page for your podcast on Facebook. Only post things there relative to your podcast. Do not publish your kids' photos or cat photos or check-in at restaurants on your podcast page. Keep it 100% professional. Next, be consistent in your publishing schedule for your podcast. When I first started podcasting, I did like 2 episodes this week and maybe 1 in a couple weeks, then none for a couple months. Then I did 2 or 3 more, and then maybe a month later do another one. And I had to really start all over when I became serious about podcasting. So be consistent. If you publish once a week, be sure you do so on the same day, preferably at the same time, because your followers, those who are actually going to be following you, are expecting it. If you publish every morning at 9 a.m., Monday morning at 9 a.m., every Monday morning at 9 a.m., and you start building a following, these people are going to work Monday morning thinking about at 9 a.m., another episode is coming out of this podcast. And if they get a coffee break at 10:15 and they go to click on it to listen to it and it's not there, they're lost. And if they come back at lunch and they see it's still not there, I wonder what happened. And then at dinner time, they say, oh, it was published at 4:30 today. And then next week, you skipped it at all because you were on vacation. You can record ahead and schedule it to be published, but it needs to be published. And these podcasts here on our Ask Bob program are scheduled in advance, and they will be released at a specific day and a specific time. You need to do the same thing with your podcast. Be specific and consistent in your publishing schedule. Okay. Don't publish Monday this week and Thursday next week and Friday the week after and a Tuesday the week after. Use a system to make sure your episodes are published the same day and preferably the same time each episode. Your listeners will expect it from you. So if you do this, your audience become accustomed to listening to you. Okay. If you become inconsistent in your publishing, they will be, or your publication and your production, they will become inconsistent listeners. Inconsistent listeners means no growth for your podcast. So be consistent, start to receive consistent listeners, which will translate into consistent growth. And create a page for your podcast that your listeners will be able to interact with you on. Make it exciting. Imagine if you were following your favorite movie star and you found out they had a Facebook page. Wow, this is cool, right? Or they have a Twitter account and you become a member of that community. Now imagine if you were commenting on something there and received a reply directly back from your favorite movie star. How cool would that be? Would you be excited about it? You're actually talking to your movie star favorite, your favorite movie star. Did it take that movie star a lot of time to comment on your post? No, 10 seconds, maybe. But in that few minutes of interaction, did that movie star generate loyalty from you? Yeah. And now you are more likely to become an even greater and more loyal fan, right? Well, the same thing happens in your podcasting. If you begin to engage with your listeners on social media, they'll be loyal fans and followers of your podcast. They'll be more likely to share it and tell their friends about it as well. All of this will result in more growth for your podcast. So another way is also to reach out to other podcasters, become guests on their podcasts. This is a way to leverage someone else's audience, people that you would never interact with immediately. These podcasters have spent time, energy, and money building up a loyal audience. If you are a guest on their podcast, you will be exposing your brand to their audience. When given an opportunity, give the contact information for your website. Create a free offer that's valuable to them. Using our example from before when I was talking about on restoring classic cars, it could be a free 10-point checklist called How to Start Restoring Classic Cars. It just highlights the 10 categories on your 10x10 matrix. That's where you got your list from. And I'll put a link for those that may have missed it. A 10x10 matrix is a way of keeping track of topics you can talk about on your podcast. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Okay? But that checklist will be valuable to somebody, and they will now go to your website to download the information. Using an autoresponder, you can capture their email address in the process of sending them that checklist. Just put something on there, thank you for requesting my checklist on how to start restoring classic cars. What email address would you like me to send this to? And boom, there you go. You have their name and their email. Now you can email that person from the other podcaster's audience. Remember that information concerning your podcast. You've expanded your audience reach to that other podcaster's audience. You didn't steal them away. You've allowed their audience to expand their horizons by providing value through your podcast. The other podcaster is grateful because you, as a guest, are providing insights and perspectives to their audience, things that they may not have seen or looked at in that different way before. You're blessed because you're being a blessing to them. But be sure to include a call to action in your podcast. I used to be inconsistent in this in my podcast, but I'm getting better at it. If you begin to ask people for them to take specific actions, some will not. If you don't ask, nobody will. It's that simple. But let's say you wanted them to download that free checklist, just like I have down in our show notes down below, and I've been talking about it on every episode, a free podcast creation checklist. And it's at the end of this episode as well. If you do not make people aware of it, nobody knows about it. They don't know what that link is for. If nobody knows about it, nobody downloads it. If nobody downloads it, your email list of contacts never increases. Does that make sense? Of course it does. But if you ask and say 1,000 people hear about it, and maybe 10 or 15 actually download it, well, that's 15 more that you have on your list. Ask again the next episode, and then the next one after that, and the next one after that. Eventually, you can have 1,000 people on your email list just from podcasting. This will allow you to stay in contact with them. It'll allow you to offer your products and your services to them. It'll allow you to increase your business, increase your listing and audience, increase the value you provide. Basically, win, win, win. They're happy with it because they got the information they requested. Those are just some of the ways you can build your audience for your podcast. There are dozens of ways, but those are the most popular. And I'll be covering more later on, especially when I begin to talk about monetization. Now, if you find these videos helpful, please give us a rating and comment down below. It helps others to find this information as well, and I thank you in advance for that. See how I'm giving that call to action, just like I got done talking about, right? Now, over the course of these podcasts, these videos, I want to answer any questions you may have concerning podcasting. Now, again, you can leave your questions or comments down below, but a better way of communicating with me and making sure I see your questions rapidly is by using the contact form on my website. Go to podcast-training.com and click on the little contact form up in the top and send along your question. Now, if your question is used on the podcast, again, I will give you credit for it by bringing it to my attention, and you will receive a free download of my book, The Complete Podcast, or The Complete Guide to Podcasting. That is a $37 value. You'll get it for free just for sending along your question and if used on the Ask Bob program. Now, if you include your website and your podcast information as well, I'll be referencing that and put those links in the show note down below also. Who knows? You could see some increased traffic to your website, your podcast, your products, your services. We don't know. But again, if you don't, then you know how many will actually click on the link to go there. None. So give it to us. We'll promote it and see what happens, right? All from just asking a question. Now, again, if I get the same question from more than one person, the first person to ask it is the one that gets all the benefits. So if you have a question, don't wait. Go to podcast-training.com, fill out the contact form today. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in order to be notified when a new episode is being published and a new question is being answered. Also down below in the show notes is a link to the free podcast creation checklist that I use. This is the outline I use in my podcast training program. You can have the checklist free of charge. Just click on it. There's nothing to buy. You just follow the checklist in order, step by step, and you can have your podcast up and running soon. Now, in the next episode, I'm going to begin answering the question, are podcasts required to comply with copyright and royalty laws? What is that topic about? Come back next time and find out. Till then, you need to get out there and you need to start your podcast.